Son, our
Oh.
first podcast in person after about 3 years. Our first one together.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Should be a good one. Year in review. Think it'll be fun to look back on all the big stories from this season. It was a fun season. Hopefully we get another fun one next year.
Yeah. All right. You ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American Take on Formula One. In this episode, our favorite moments from F1 2023, our craziest predictions, our biggest surprises, plus our analysis of every team, every driver pairing, and what we think this all will mean for F1 in 2024. Patrick, son, let's start with your top 5 drivers in F1 for 2023.
Ooh, top 5 drivers. Some real surprises, some guys not so surprising, and, a fair amount of mediocrity. But I think we saw some really good racing. I think, at the top, it is hard to say anyone other than Max was the best driver this season, just breaking all kinds of records with Red Bull. He would have, if Perez wasn't even on Red Bull, if they just had Max, they still would have won the Constructors' Championship, just from his points total. Crazy amount of laps led. He now has the record for most wins in a single season. He's already surpassed to get into the top 4 most wins of all time among any driver. I mean, just crazy stuff from this season. I think he was far and away the most consistent driver, obviously helped out by his car and by his team, but you really can't get a whole lot better than what he did.
Yeah. Max, best team, best car, best driver. It was like Jordan Game 6 of every race. All right, 2 through 5. Who do you got?
Oh, man. I think we have to give props to some of the old guys this season, especially the way Aston started. I'm going to say Fernando Alonso was my second best driver of the season. Obviously, I'm partial to him. He's my favorite driver. He's the reason I kind of got into Formula One. But he had just such an exceptional comeback season. I think this year, everyone thought it was just such a bad move for him to move from Alpine over to Aston, which was a team that was really struggling the last couple of years. And out of the gate, I think 4 or 5 of the first 6 races, he was on the podium. Deep into the season, he was P2 in the Drivers' Championship, or maybe P3 behind Perez. But ultimately, I think finishing 4th just behind Hamilton, if I recall correctly. Just a great season from him. He had probably 70% of Aston's points total. Just really, really awesome driving from him. And, I think kind of his longevity gives hope to some of these other guys who either have been dominant in their careers or are currently dominating. If they want to, they probably can race for another good long while. So,
yeah, in his 40s, in what's probably over the course of the season the 5th best car at most, multiple podiums. Shame he never got a win, but yeah, Alonso was really just amazing in 23.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun to watch, especially through the first half of the season. And hopefully, next year they can bring a good car to start, but then kind of continue to develop throughout the season. I think they fell off pretty hard there in the second half of the year. Moving on to third driver, I think there's a few guys up for this spot. I'm going to go with the young guy, Lando Norris. He's a lot of fun to watch. That McLaren is pretty hit or miss, it seems like, but he pretty much gets that car to the top spot that it possibly can just about every race. He's one of the most consistent drivers, I think. He's one of the fastest and most talented drivers. And he had a really, really good run in the second half of the season. kind of getting McLaren back up into the top 5 and, just making it seem or giving McLaren hope for next season, giving fans hope for next season that if they don't start off so badly, they can compete with the top 3, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari. Maybe they can't compete with Red Bull quite yet at the top. Maybe Mercedes is a little too far off, but they really should be able to put pressure on Ferrari. And they weren't really able to do that this season just because of how woeful they were at the start of the season.
Yeah, I've got high hopes for McLaren in 24, Lando as well. He had a great season. I think they will put pressure on Ferrari for sure, maybe a bit on Red Bull and Mercedes. I think we might see Lando with a podium next year.
Yeah, I hope he can finally kind of get over that winless curse. I think he'll probably be able to at least have a shot at getting a win next season. So that'll be fun to watch. 4th, I think, again, there's a lot of guys in this kind of area where they had some really solid seasons, ups and downs, beat out their teammates. I think I'm going to give it to Lewis Hamilton. I think that Mercedes garage is, a little bit shell-shocked still at just how dominant Red Bull has been the last couple seasons. Lewis Hamilton very frequently was one of the few guys that could kind of keep up and keep pace with the Red Bulls. He did pretty much all he could and ended up coming in P3 and very close, I think, to P2, which is a little bit surprising given how dominant that Red Bull was this season. I think he had a really tough year last year, and with George coming in and kind of showing Hamilton up a little bit, he beat him out in the standings last year, and Lewis Hamilton came out with a little bit more fire this season, and I think he really wants to prove that he is still one of the best drivers on the grid, and I think he did that pretty well this season.
Yeah, coming in 3rd, and he nearly got 2nd, which would have just, as a fireable offense, I think, at Red Bull, given how good that car was. I got rid of Sergio had that happen. So, okay, you have Max, Alonso, Lando, and Hamilton. Who do you have 5th?
I think I almost want to give this to Leclerc. I almost want to even give it to Albon, but I'm going to go with the young rookie driver, teenager, Oscar Piastri for McLaren. I think he had one of the best rookie seasons we have seen in a very long time. It is not easy to come into Formula One and just kind of be really good off the bat. He had his struggles, some issues in qualifying, some issues in the races, but overall he performed really well, helped McLaren, and I think everyone is very excited for his future and the future of that team with 2 exceptional young drivers. It'll be a lot of fun to watch if they can keep both of them around.
Nice. So, Oscar came in with all the controversy, but he delivered. So, he pushed his teammate Lando. He did great. He's, like you said, he had one of the best rookie seasons we've seen maybe since Charles Leclerc. So I'm with you on that one. Max, Alonso, Lando, Hamilton, and Oscar Piastri. For me, similar Max. 10 races in a row, over 1,000 laps led. He's just locked in. No one is close. Hard to have anyone else. I've got Fernando, like you, number 2. Came 4th in the standings. He's in his 40s. He's in a mid-pack car. Just amazing what it did. I think I am going to put Charles Leclerc then in 3rd. Every spy movie the last 20 years, every James Bond movie, every Mission Impossible movie, it's always like, the threat's coming from inside. It's an inside job. I swear to God, Ferrari must have an inside job, trying to prevent Charles from winning a race, from winning a championship. He seems to overcome every struggle with that car, every struggle inside that team. And he's the only one that really, I think, pushed Max in any race this year. So I've got Charles 3rd. Oscar, the rookie, I have him in 4th. Like I said, best rookie we've seen in many a year. And then Lewis in 5th. He's really been dragging the team for their failings these last couple of years. He's been very vocal about that, very public about it. I think it's going to pay off. There have been some firings. They've brought in some good talent. We'll see what that car is like in 24. But for him to even sniff P2 that late in the season was one heck of a showing. So Max, Fernando, Charles, Oscar, and Lewis, and a bonus for Liam Lawson for stepping in as a rookie and doing so well. Awesome. Now, every driver that we saw in 23 at the end of the season, they are being brought back in 2024. Do we think they're going to last through the season? Do we think they'll be brought back in 2025? Any thoughts on, do you think Perez is going to last all of 24? You think he'll be brought back for Red Bull in 25? You think Alonso might retire? Any thoughts on what we think is going to happen in 2024? Because this is the first time in a long time, it seems like, where everybody's coming back.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised that everybody was coming back. I highly doubt that will happen again. I do not believe everybody on the grid at the end of this season, everybody that they say is going to be on the grid at the start of next season, will finish next season. And certainly not with their current teams, I don't believe. I have to imagine that if he does not put in just an exceptional first half of the season, Perez will likely not get a contract extension with Red Bull. Helmut Marko was saying, we already have a deal in place for Liam Lawson to return to the grid in 2025. I think it's very possible that we see either Liam Lawson with Red Bull or with AlphaTauri in 2025.
Yeah, Daniel Ricciardo finished the season with the Red Bull sister team AlphaTauri. I think there's all these, public pressure on Sergio Perez, public pressure on Red Bull, and everyone sort of hopes that much like Daniel Ricciardo will get that seat, be Max's teammate. I think Ricciardo's has had too steep of a drop off over the last couple of years. I don't think he will get the Red Bull seat, but I also, like you, don't think Sergio will be back in 25. It's just, there's not really any justification for that, I think.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting, I guess, to see sort of Perez's path, because I don't think he's coming back to Red Bull, but I'm not sure he's going to be completely forced off of the grid. There are other teams with kind of middling, struggling drivers that, Perez proved himself. He was solid in a mid-pack car. He would get that thing up in the points pretty consistently, really push it to its limits. That's why Red Bull went out and got him. But, there's other teams. I don't know if Bottas is going to be back with Alfa Romeo after next season. I don't know if they'll stick with Zhou after next season. So, there's a team where Perez could easily slot into, I think.
Yeah, that's, some of these teams are in flux in the sense that, will Red Bull sell off the AlphaTauri team or be forced to? Because, a lot of people have issues with them having two teams, sort of in effect control over two teams. As Alfa Romeo, it's in the process of being sold. What's happening there? They're working on new engines and new regs for 26. Some of these teams, it's sort of like, what's Bottas bringing Alfa Romeo now or in 2024? What's Zhou bringing Alfa Romeo in 2024? Some of these drivers being brought back, I think it's a very safe decision. And F1 has gotten a little bit too safe as it's gotten more corporate. But yeah, I think at some point you need to look, and it's like, hey, these guys aren't helping us for the future. Mm-hmm. They're not helping us now. So, maybe we don't need them at all. Similarly, what about Logan Sargent? I was a bit surprising they brought him back. He looked very much like a struggling rookie much of the year. He's in a car that was a fair car, but nothing special. Although Albon made it look maybe give a bit more pace than I think most people felt it deserved. He also just cost them millions of dollars. I think Logan Sargent had the most crashes or most, costly crashes for the year, about $4 million. So I was slightly surprised he was brought back. Maybe the team was like, you know what, this is a very tough sport. He's done okay. Right now, we don't have anyone ready to just sort of jump in that seat. He can keep it warm. but I could see him getting pulled in 2024 in mid-season.
Yep, I agree with that. I think he is the driver that's on the hottest seat, I guess we'll say. He had a really tough season. Williams does have a history of kind of hanging on to young drivers for a long time, most recently with Latifi. So, I think it's possible that they kind of just keep sticking with him and kind of riding that wave and hoping he improves. I'm not sure. I think they may have to fill, a couple of seats by the end of next season. Albon maybe moves on up to a better team in a better seat. Who's to say? And, I think it's a little bit scary, I think, right now for Logan Sargent. I think he really needs to prove himself out of the gate in this next season.
You mentioned Albon moving up, and that's another topic. Do we think anyone in 2024 will get poached? So, for example, Nico Hulkenberg really, I think, is doing better than Magnussen there at Haas. He could maybe get poached by another team during the season, maybe even Red Bull. Maybe they get rid of Sergio, bring Nico. Similarly, Carlos Sainz, maybe he could go to Red Bull. Ferrari has made it clear, and I think they're justified in this, but they've made it clear that Charles Leclerc is their boy. They always say, there's no number one driver, but we all know there is, and it's Leclerc. So any thoughts on that, or who you think might get a sort of a promotion in 2024?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that Hulkenberg is the guy that any of the top teams are looking for. I'm not sure that he's going to do a whole lot more for, say, a Red Bull than Perez already is. It's just kind of a new face, but the same story. Not that he's a bad driver, not really that Perez is a bad driver. It's just, look, your talent pales in comparison to Max Verstappen, as does pretty much everybody. And you're just not the guy for the top team to compete with their number one driver. I think Sainz might have a shot. He might poke Verstappen's buttons a little bit. I think, a guy like Albon is probably very desirable for some teams, especially, potentially if Aston is kind of just as good this year. Alonso, if he decides to move on from Formula One, or maybe, they say Lance Stroll decides, you know what, I don't really want to drive in Formula One anymore. This isn't fun for me anymore, Dad. I don't need to do it anymore. Go find another driver. I think having one of those guys come into your team would really give it a boost.
Yeah, Stroll's dad, Lawrence Stroll, who owns the Aston Martin team, has talked several times about how much F1 has helped the value of Aston Martin. And I think at some point it's like, hey, Lance Stroll, hey, son, you're bringing the value down. Maybe find another hobby. So we'll see. But especially this season after Alonso, the old man just showed him up so badly. Now, let's take a quick look at how the teams fared in 23. Speaking of Aston, they were up 225 points over 2022. That is shocking. And let's say that's not all Alonso, but it's mostly Alonso. And then the team sort of, I think, getting the Mercedes engine and then getting, the car design right. McLaren up 143 points. And given how woeful they looked at the start of 23, that is impressive. Red Bull up 101 points. This actually shocked me. I'm like, man.
100 more points than I know. Basically killed everybody in 2022.
That is just shocking to me. Max was, like I said, he was in the zone. But some of these, though, Ferrari down 148 points versus their 2022 totals. That is not good, given how much they struggled in 2022. Mercedes down 106 points. They can say, we got the car design wrong, or the whole side pod, no pod, in totals like, in 2024, we've got this fixed. But it's like, look, Max just showed you up bad, for Mercedes to go down 106 points from 23, 22. That's not good.
Yeah, that's a little bit surprising, At the start of 2022, right, it was like, ooh, maybe Ferrari has Red Bull's number this year. Red Bull had some reliability issues in the first few races. Ferrari, was by far the fastest car in the first couple of races in last season. So I think that's probably where a lot of those points came from. Even so, 148 points over 22 races is a lot, especially if one of your main rivals, Mercedes, is also not doing as well as they did the previous year. You know, those points go somewhere. You got to beat the McLarens. You got to, compete with Mercedes and with Red Bull. That is too many points to give away. I think a lot of it had to do with either silly mistakes from the drivers or kind of just these weird engine problems that they kind of consistently have at Ferrari, where it retires the car from the race and then they get no points from that. So I think there's a couple of things there they have to, try to manage or build the more reliable power unit engine so that, they're not having all of these DNFs. I don't think Red Bull maybe had any, maybe a couple after getting whacked by other cars, but really no reliability issues. Mercedes had very few. Ferrari's got to kind of figure that out, I think. And, you know, their drivers are stressed, I think, all of the time. Ferrari puts a lot of pressure on their drivers and they kind of sabotage themselves very frequently. And I think that really harms Leclerc and Sainz when they actually do get out on track. So I think they really got to kind of figure that out. They have or had a new team boss this season. Hopefully he kind of works his way towards righting that ship for next season.
Yeah, I don't fault Leclerc and or Ferrari for coming in second, or Lewis and Mercedes for coming in second. Right now, Max is just head and shoulders above them. And Red Bull has a better paddock and they've got a better car. But Red Bull pulling further away is one thing. But this season was Red Bull pulled ahead and Ferrari and Mercedes sort of went back. There needs to be, I think, more accountability with those two teams that we did not see. Now, best surprises of the season, Patrick. What do you like? For me, the Vegas race, the qualifying got off to a poor start. The media was just eager for this race to fail well before it started. F1 media in particular, it was clear they were hoping this would be a disaster. It was just the opposite. It was a fun weekend, an amazing race, fun course. What a finish. Was it Sergio and Alonso?
Leclerc.
Oh yeah. I'm also mixing Brazil, but yeah, that was
the very next race.
Yeah. Las Vegas was great. So to me, and everything could have gone wrong. And one thing did go wrong, first round qualifying, but that was it, or practice. And so, yeah, Vegas, that to me was the best surprise of 23.
I think that's a good one. Probably my best surprise too. It was just, I was excited for the Vegas race, but I was very nervous because I knew that if anything happened, everyone would say, see, this is why we don't give the US more races. This is why everyone didn't want Vegas to happen. This is the reason that Britain is better, why the EU is better, blah, blah, blah. And you know what? They all had to eat it because they were 100% wrong. And it was just so much fun to watch. It was so exciting and, really happy to see how fun it was.
Yeah, that was not only a great race, but F1 has made the commitment. They're spending a fortune to establish a long-term presence in Vegas. Now, other fun surprises, all the Alonso podiums.
Yeah.
Got the P2 in Canada, the pass in Brazil. Liam Lawson, the young rookie, just being put into that seat when Ricciardo went down. That was a great surprise. And then we've talked about this before. Charles just never quitting and McLaren just getting so much better all season.
Yeah, it was a really good season. A lot of fun to watch. Watching Alonso just absolutely dominate the first maybe 5, 6 races. Tons of podiums for him. So many points for him. He did so much better than he did in that Alpine just a year ago. And just, getting an opportunity to continue to show just how good he is and how good he's always been, even though he hasn't really been with maybe the right teams at the right time. It was just a lot of fun to watch. Liam Lawson is another one, a young driver that I think we both fully expect will be back in Formula One. And I'm excited to see him back again. I wish it was next season, but we may have to wait a little bit longer to see him. Just such a good and exciting season. And, hopefully we get more of that next year. Hopefully it can be a little bit more competitive for P1. But other than that, I think everything else played out just as most fans would want it to.
Yeah, looking at my biggest disappointments of 23, and it was the no competition at the front. Max just, not his teammate, not Lewis, not Fernando, not Charles. I mean, maybe race to race, they gave us hope, but really he just ran away with it.
Yeah.
I think these regulations, we're seeing cars kind of bunch up, second, third, fourth, fifth, but we need it at the front. Okay, switching to the soft compound. What in this holiday season, Patrick, are you hoping Santa brings you for F1 in 2024?
I am wishing for some papaya wins. I want McLaren to get back up on that top step. I want to have confirmation of an 11th team joining Formula One. I would love it if everyone finally signed off on that Andretti Cadillac team. I think that would be really exciting and just, another good step for Formula One and the US, more people getting involved. And frankly, I'm hoping that if that does happen, there is an Andretti Cadillac team, that they say, you know what, screw all the norms. We are going to have our home base of operations in the US, because I think that we really only have a select few or a small group of people that actually can work in F1. It's only people that live in the UK or there in the EU that really have an opportunity to do that without leaving kind of everything else they know behind.
That's a good one, because it's a global sport. There are more races in the US now than anywhere else. We should have this Andretti Cadillac team. Eugene Haas, his base of operations is here, but effectively with maybe, 3.5 exceptions, it's all run out of the UK. And hey, God bless the UK. And I'm glad they helped make F1 the sport it is today, but it's global and it's tilting toward America. So that's a really good one, Patrick. For me, I would say yes, Ferrari, there is a Santa Claus. And so let's hope for a Ferrari championship. I think that would be a tough one to see, but I would love it. Same. Give Alonso his third world championship. That would be awesome. Both of these are, it's like, I don't know if Santa can do that, kid. Those are tough asks, but it's very minimum. Let's get a full season title fight. Max, Charles, Lewis, maybe throw in Alonso, maybe throw in Lando. How about that?
That would be cool.
Alonso win. Lando win. Get Hulkenberg on the podium. I think these are all good. So those are all going in my list. I'm going to put that under plate with some milk and cookies for Santa Claus. What about any concerns for 2024? Like too many races, not enough, Red Bull just too far ahead? Any sort of pressing concerns that you can think of, Patrick?
My concerns are, sure, I guess Red Bull is still just way too far out there. I guess I have some reservations about how kind of the FIA hands out penalties and things like that, either to drivers during the races or even to teams, for breach of, conduct or the cost cap or whatever it might be. They seem to be inconsistent in how they sanction drivers and teams. So I'm a little bit wary of how they will go about that this season, given that there's been a lot of talk or controversy with regard to how they've done that in the past. So I don't know if they'll go overboard or double down on kind of the bare minimum penalties that they're giving out. So we'll see how that goes.
Yep. For me, one of the things you talked about penalties, and we've discussed this before. I mean, there are some racetrack incidents where they hand out 5-second penalties. Sometimes they hand them out in real time, sometimes a bit later during the race. But we're always like, this is either a racing incident, at which point there should be no penalty, or this matters. And you could send a car crashing into the barriers, a driver being injured, in which case 5 seconds is a ridiculous penalty. Mm-hmm. So I think we sort of have to get some of that straightened out, some clarity there. We talked about the number of U.S. races. Vegas, that's the new Monaco, and they really shined. Texas, Austin, that race been going on for many years now. I mean, it's established, it's fun. Miami has no identity. I think they need to work on an identity. Why do we have this race? I think they wanted to be the new Monaco, but Vegas was like, not so fast. They also haven't figured out yet what to do with sprints. I like sprints.
Yeah.
I like that you pay money on a Saturday because you can't afford to see the actual race on Sunday. And so you're going to get to see a sprint. But they keep tinkering with this because F1 obviously wants that money. So they want to keep the sprints. But, they haven't figured out how they want these sprints to be run, how they want them to impact team standings. And so they seem to constantly just sort of, just sort of playing at the margins, and they need to do something with that. So, yeah, those are my big ones. And then, we talked about this on the previous episode, is sports is becoming so popular, such a great pathway to wealth and content creation and branding that even nations are getting involved, like with Leave Golf or venture capital firms or giant multi-trillion-dollar tech companies like Apple. How will that impact races going forward? That's something that I think, is a bit of a concern.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to look at. Yeah, there's so much going on in the sport, and we'll see, what they decide to do with some of these tracks. Miami, you mentioned, I think that's the one race in the US that really needs a makeover. Just kind of figure out how to make it more interesting, more fun, how to get more people involved in that. Yeah, there's a lot that I think we tend to talk about, and especially when they come up in races. The sprints are always interesting. I enjoy sprints. Most traditionalists do not enjoy the sprints, but I think they're fun, and I think they need to be made more fun and not forgotten about. Yeah, there's just a lot of good things that F1 can do and maybe should do, but there's also a lot of stuff that, hopefully they don't screw up.
I'm also curious to see how all this new money is going to affect not just the sport, but driver salaries. We talked about with Leave Golf just dropping not just millions of dollars for golf paychecks. They're handing out contracts that are valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Max Verstappen, from what we hear, makes about 70 million a year. Lewis Hamilton, 50, 60 million a year. Alonso, about 30 to 40 million a year. These are just almost unfathomable numbers. And yet, they're putting their lives on the line. They're flying all around the world. They have a lot of interviews. They'll talk with folks on the grid. These top golfers, they can be making 100 million, 200 million in total. And, that's an easy living. So I can see we might be, with all the money flowing into F1, on the cusp of a sort of revolution in driver salary where, 5 years from now, Max signs a deal with, 200 million a year, for example, just something crazy.
Yeah, that would be pretty impressive. I mean, we even see that in baseball very recently. We've seen some just monster contracts. What's his name? Ohtani just signed, 700 million over something like 10 years. So it's just crazy, some of these contracts that athletes are getting these days.
Well, and I think with few exceptions, when you talked about how many teams sort of are operated out of England, I think there's a parochial nature still in F1. And I think we are going to see revolutions, if not in the sport, in the money behind it. And, I think folks outside of the UK and old Europe don't realize how much money is in sport, how many viewers there are. Here in the United States, a couple weeks ago, we watched a college football game. It's a university football game. It was Michigan, Ohio State, 20 million viewers. In the US, Monaco probably gets 1 to 2 million viewers. And the room for growth is just huge. All right. Any crazy predictions, Patrick, for the 2024 season?
Crazy predictions. My crazy prediction is that Toto Wolff decides he's fucking over it. He sells his stake in Mercedes Formula One and moves on.
Ooh, that would be a good one. I mean, Toto, I think you might be right. Toto's a money guy, whereas Christian Horner is just, F1 is in his blood. For Toto, it's the money. And I'm not knocking him. I'm not knocking either guy. This is who they are. There's a lot of money coming in. Toto might see as a great chance to cash out. All the nasty rumors that were spread recently with him and his wife sharing information that they weren't supposed to, that may have left him a little, angry. Plus, Toto's biggest failing, I think, in F1 is he wants everything to be sort of nice. Everyone get along, Can't we all just get along? And I don't think that's going to happen. I think Lewis is like, man, my chance at an 8th is slipping away. We got to get this damn car right. And he's going to want more than just, who was the technical director, the guy he got fired recently. I mean, he's going to want a lot more people fired. And then he's got to deal with George. George is sitting there like, hey man, I'm not the number 2 to Lewis Hamilton. That'll be his 3rd year in the team. There's going to be some drama inside Mercedes.
I think so.
And so Toto could see now's the time to go. He can cash out and live drama free. So that is a good one. Mine has to do with money. So I believe it was during a college football game. I saw Apple Macintosh advertisement on television, and it featured Jamie Chadwick. She's a female driver that I can guarantee our non-American listeners, as well as our American listeners, nobody knows her. Apple Macintosh advertisement on network television featuring Jamie Chadwick. Nobody knows her. And that's not a knock on her or her talent. Just no one, there's a handful of us who know who she is. But to me, that's Apple just sort of testing the waters, just seeing what they can get here, what can go on, what kind of attention they're going to do. Is this going to make good business sense for them? And you know what? Apple's worth about $3 trillion. They can drop a couple billion a year for exclusive rights to F1, F1 streaming, F1 sanctioned content. And if it crashes and burns, it's a rounding error for them. So my big prediction is in 2024, we are going to hear that Apple Inc. has purchased long-term exclusive viewing rights to F1.
Dang. That would be very interesting. Suppose they'd still have the Sky Team on there? Or would they do something else?
Yeah, I mean, just hey, you want to stick with Sky or you want to come over to Apple? I think that choice is going to be clear. All right. I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to hardcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We definitely will read them. I wish to thank you all for listening to everybody's most beloved father and son F1 podcast. I hope you have a wonderful holiday and a prosperous and happy 2024. And we are lights out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Good show, son. I wanted to tell you a quick story. A little town where I live had put a nice little Christmas show. And, we had the carolers, we had the kids out. There were little fire pits where you could roast your marshmallows and make your s'mores. And there was a little stand. These guys from high school operating a little stand. They were selling sticks and marshmallows and graham crackers and Hershey chocolate bars. So we could all just walk over to the little fire pits and the lovely Christmas setting and make our s'mores. And I should say, in all fairness, they weren't actually selling it. It was, they were taking donations. But I walked up there to get me a stick and marshmallows and like, hey man, you like F1? I'm like, yeah, I do. Like, you Max fan? I love Max. I'm like, yeah, I am a Max fan. I do like Max. And then it took me a few seconds because I realized then I was wearing my Red Bull cap. And these high school kids in America, in the middle of America, were just raving about how much they love F1, how big Max Verstappen fans they were. And it was just kind of a pleasant surprise. And it's always great to see more American F1 fans, especially younger fans.
Nice.